Good Shabbos, everyone. Earlier this week, I had the honor of attending the AIPAC Policy Conference in Washington, D.C. There, I was surrounded by 18,000 people, including 88 Beth Yeshurun congregants. I'm also thankful that many members of our synagogue professional and lay leadership were there, including our president, Jared Bloom, and Rabbis Morgan and Rabbi Horowitz. It was also extremely comforting in Washington at the AIPAC Policy Conference to be surrounded by so many like-minded people, fellow Americans who, like me, are emotionally attached to Israel, a country that is essential to our identities as Americans. But as you walked into the Washington, D.C. Convention Center, you could not help but notice the hundreds of protesters outside. Protesters not only protesting the existence of the state of Israel, but also claiming that participants like me were guilty of what's called dual loyalty. And what does that mean when someone accuses a lover of Israel or an American Jew of dual loyalty? It's been a charge that's been around for a long time. It's a charge that's used to harass, marginalize, and persecute our people for centuries. The dual loyalty accusation alleges that we should be suspected of being disloyal citizens because our true allegiance is to other Jews around the world, or even to some immoral and secret Jewish agenda. This anti-Semitic allegation suggests that non-Jews, our non-Jewish neighbors and friends, should never trust our motives or our actions because we're Jews. I know I'd want to stay for my sermon too. I get it. It's all right. No problem at all. It's an allegation that suggests that we as Jews can't be trusted because we may be engaged in deceitful behavior to accomplish our own goals at the expense of others. That we're not really English, French, or Americans. We're just Jews and nothing more. It reminds me of a line Albert Einstein once said. Einstein once said, "If my theory of relativity is proven successful, Germany will claim me as a German and France will declare that I'm a citizen of the world. If my theory of relativity should prove to be untrue, then France will say I'm a German, and Germany will say I'm a Jew." In America, during the years leading up to World War II, isolationists opposed American involvement in the conflict, claiming the struggle was little more than a Jewish cause. Anti-Semites such as Charles Lindbergh rallied against Jewish groups for agitating for war on behalf of a foreign people. After the establishment of the State of Israel, the slander of disloyalty gained new momentum. Anti-Semites lamented the disproportionate influence of Zionists, or the so-called Israel lobby, as if a foreign government had implanted itself as a hostile political force inside the capital. Regarding both wars in Iraq, even today, years later, we continue to hear echoes of the charge from those who rail endlessly about neocons who drag the country into war. The targets of their accusations, usually Jewish. Sadly, the dual loyalty insult remains among the most widely held anti-Semitic slurs around the world. In ADL's 2015 poll on anti-Semitic attitudes, more than 30% of the American public asserted that Jews are actually more loyal to Israel than to America. And that finding has remained virtually unchanged since ADL started polling on this question in 1964. Of course, we recently saw the charge of dual loyalty come up again when a freshman congresswoman from Minnesota questioned the allegiance of supporters of Israel, casting us as Jewish Americans as the other who can't be trusted, suggesting that we actually place the concerns of Israel above those of the country that we call home. Of course, statements such as these are anti-Semitic because they claim that if we as Jews love Israel, have ties to family and friends in Medinat Yisrael in the state of Israel, or even have an appreciation for Israeli culture, we can't be trusted. If we believe in the idea of Jewish self-determination in our historic homeland, we're not full Americans. If we believe in the promise of a Jewish state, then we're not loyal to the United States. Of course, nothing can be farther from the truth. It's just the current use of an age-old anti-Semitic trope. My friends, the reality is that many of these connections we have with Israel are just like the connections other ethnic groups have. Think of Irish Americans and their attachments to Ireland. Think of their attachments to Ireland. When they wear green on St. Patrick's Day and drink a lot of Irish beer, we don't think they're being disloyal to America. We go and drink with them. Recently, I did more when I was in Austin, but not so much anymore. Recently, my wonderful Chinese neighbors celebrated the Chinese New Year. When they did so, it was a nice conversation starter, an opportunity for me to learn about Chinese culture. I didn't think for a second, because they were celebrating the Year of the Rat, that they were planning something against the United States. I just wondered, what does the Year of the Rat mean? No one would ever think, because they were celebrating the New Year that they grew up with, that they were planning something nefarious against America. The only people who would be those who have something against Chinese Americans. When Korean Americans, Canadian Americans, or Japanese Americans lobby their elected officials for policies that strengthen their former countries, no one criticizes their actions. Only anti-Semites single us out for our love and devotion for Israel. We can love Israel and still be proud Americans. To suggest something else is not just anti-Zionism, it's a continuation of that anti-Semitic dual loyalty charge that Jews have suffered for centuries. My wife's grandfather used to tell me about how his father fought bravely for Germany in World War I. But just a few decades later, all of a sudden his German neighbors started questioning his allegiance to Germany just because he was a Jew. A few years later, he was killed, murdered in a concentration camp. We hope, we would expect that people of goodwill would intervene when the charge of disloyalty is leveled today, especially when an anti-Semitic member of the United States Congress does so. I'm pleased to tell you that there were a lot of people of goodwill at AIPAC, elected officials on both sides of the aisle, who are working very hard against those who hate you and me because we are Jews. Where else in America today, in 2019, can you have both Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence say pretty much the same thing? Is there even a conference left in America today where they would both participate? Unfortunately, no. But at AIPAC, they did. Perhaps only at AIPAC, where you had the most important members of the Senate and the House of Representatives, both Republicans and Democrats, both call out anti-Semites like Representative Ilhan Omar. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, the Democrat from Maryland, declared to a rousing standing ovation, "I stand with Israel, proudly and unapologetically, so when someone accuses American supporters of Israel of dual loyalty, I say, accuse me." He said, "I'm part of a large bipartisan coalition in Congress supporting Israel. I tell Israel detractors, accuse us." Thank God, a majority of Americans still support the idea of a Jewish state and would never accuse us of dual loyalty. As Meghan McCain quoted her extraordinary father, may he continue to rest in peace, John McCain, he once said, and she repeated Sunday, "Americans don't support Israel because AIPAC is influential. AIPAC is influential because Americans support Israel." But my friends, The love most Americans have for Israel today can quickly change. Howard Cord, the CEO of AIPAC, opened the conference with the following. He said, "We're being challenged in a way that is new and far more aggressive. While there have always been critics and detractors," he said, "today they are emboldened and energized, and their false claims of dual loyalty are taken at face value by new and larger audiences. The outrageous charge of dual loyalty is a signal, and that signal, amplified by today's social media, is now empowering people who have long opposed our cause, our movement, and frankly, everything we have built." He ended with the following warning. He said, "The intense hatred of Israel is creeping from the margins to the center of our politics." My friends, let us never give up the fight, because the intense hatred of our state and of us, God forbid, could one day become the norm here in America. Just ask our fellow Jews in Great Britain. That's why on Sunday we heard from the British Member of Parliament, Joan Ryan. She addressed to the AIPAC conference the controversy surrounding widespread anti-Semitism now found in the British Labour Party, one of the two major parties in Britain. She explained the decision that she and 7 other members of the British Parliament made to quit the Labour Party with the following. She said, "I would never have believed in just 3 years that the party which backed a Jewish homeland, the party that before the Balfour Declaration in 1917 that declared that the Jews should have a state of their own, that same party would have sunk so low so fast. To go from a party being led by Tony Blair, a great friend of Israel and Jews, to a party now being led by a very dangerous anti-Semite like Jeremy Corbyn, who has a very good chance to become the next Prime Minister of Great Britain." Look up Jeremy Corbyn after Shabbat, and you'll see why our friends in Great Britain are so afraid. And this member of parliament went on. She said, "Why did I, a non-Jewish friend of Israel, travel to your conference to tell you this? To remind you that things can change quickly. To remind you that we must stay on our guard, and to remind you that we must stand our ground. We must condemn anti-Semitism unequivocally, wherever we find it, whenever we find it. No matter if it's from the margins of society or to a member of Congress, whether it's anyone on either party, on either fringe, we must condemn it anytime we hear it, and we must expect our elected officials to also do so." This past week, I was reminded that through AIPAC, we can stay on our guard and we can stand our ground. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.